Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Unnext News Radio podcast, your news source for all things unexplained. And now, here's your host for the Unnext News podcast, Margie K.
Good evening and welcome to Unnext News Radio. We are live and we're live streaming on Facebook under Unnext News Media and also on YouTube. Welcome to the program. I'm your host, Margie K. And tonight we have a little bit of a different subject to talk about. It's something that I covered in my book, Winged Aliens. However, I want to go into a little bit more depth on this subject of fairies. There's been a lot of interest in fairies as of late, and it just so happens that I've done several investigations and talked to a number of people who have actually had fairy sightings, and a few of them got some pictures. And we're going to show that to you this evening, and then you can make your own decision as to what they actually are. But first, I want to tell you a little story about how I got interested in this subject. And this started years and years ago. I'm not going to tell you how long ago, but I was 10 years old and my sister was 8. We were spending the night at my grandmother's house, and we had just gone to bed, and it was still early evening, when all of a sudden these two flying creatures came through the screen, which was closed, and came into the room. And our windows were open at that time. It was a cool summer night. One of the creatures came over to me, and the other one went over to her. One of them had dark hair like I did, and one of them had light hair like she did. And they were little fairies. They were girl fairies, and the one came close to me, was just a few inches from my face, looked me straight in the eye, and stayed there for a few seconds. And then both of these fairies went back together, and they went through the room and out another window, a window that was on the side of the house. We were so excited about it. We got up and went in and told my mother and my grandmother about what we had just seen. Of course, they didn't believe us. But my grandmother said something kind of strange. She says, well, you know, the fairies hang out underneath the kitchen window outside where the lilies of the valley are, and they seem to like lilies of the valley. That's why she planted them there. Well, this tradition came with her from Italy. And that's it turns out, I did a little research, that's what a lot of people believe, that this is one of the flowers that fairies like. So I don't know if my grandmother was just kind of joking with us at the time, or just kind of letting us believe that she believed what was happening. I wasn't quite sure. And then years later, another incident happened that is extremely bizarre. I didn't speak of this, and later on, when I had my own 2 daughters, they were sleeping in the same room, in the same beds, and the 2 of them came running out one evening at about 10:30 at night and said they just saw 2 fairies come through the front window, through the screen, look at the 2 of them, and then go out the side window. And they were about the same age, 10 and 8. Well, I was flabbergasted. My grandmother turned to me and she says, just like when you were a kid. And I said, yes, but I've never told them that story. I had never told the kids that story. And here they were telling us the same thing. Well, my kids then had the experiences of seeing fairies outside that window, in outside the kitchen window where the lilies of the valley were. And that place was always kind of a strange area where weird things would happen. Sometimes one of us would be in that area near it, maybe working in the garden or something, and then suddenly you couldn't hear anything. It was like being in a vacuum. and would look around and maybe move out of that area, and then you would start hearing birds chirping or insects or the highway noise. There was a highway turnoff not far from the house, behind the house. But once in a while, when you were in that space, sometimes that would happen. So we knew, we kind of stayed away from it. We kind of just avoided that area most of the time. Well, later that summer, another extremely bizarre thing happened that was kind of scary, actually. My grandmother and I were working outside in the backyard, and she was an avid gardener her entire life, but as she got up in years, she couldn't do that work, and I did it for her. And I took care of the entire yard, the front, the back, everything. And so she and I were out there, and my kids were playing this game of chasing each other around the house, going around in circles. And of course, the oldest one could run faster, so she was in front, and the youngest one was chasing her. And the youngest one came around the corner. She stopped dead in her tracks, and she said, "Where's my sister?" And we turned around, and she was just mortified. She said she was just right in front of me when I turned the corner, and now she's gone. Well, that spot was at that location was right under the kitchen window, that weird place. And she was gone. We thought that maybe she was playing a trick on us. So I went through the entire house, in the basement. I looked everywhere in that house, under the beds. Then we went to the neighbor's house, and she came out of her house, and she looked all through her yard. We looked for her for 45 minutes. And I said, okay, that's it. I'm calling the police because she's just gone. And at that moment, my oldest daughter came running around the corner, and she stopped dead in her tracks. And she said, "What happened?" Because everybody was in a different place. She did not realize what had happened. She said, "Rachel was behind me, and now she's not. She's in front of me. How is that even possible?" And so we discussed this. Everybody calmed down. The kids were just upset about this for a long time, as was my grandmother. And my grandmother and I were talking later that evening, and we thought, I wonder if the fairies didn't take my oldest daughter and during that time and then brought her back. Now, she had no concept that there was a missing time. She thought it was just 1 second to the next second. And so I've read stories, read books about these fairy tales where the fairies are in a different time than we are. And some of you may have heard this old tale out of England where this man saw some fairies sitting around a grove, and he went down to sit with them, sat around the campfire. He thought it was about 10 minutes, and then he got up to leave. He went home. It was 30 years later. So 30 years of time. His whole family had left that house. He didn't have contact with his family anymore. And some people that he ran into later knew him and could not believe that he was still the same age, but it was 30 years later, and they recognized him. So maybe that's a true story. I don't know. But things like that occur. So they call fairies pranksters or tricksters sometimes. And there's also tales about maybe there's an ET connection with fairies or the fae or the little people, that how they supposedly steal children or steal babies and then bring them back, or maybe they don't bring them back. But there could be some type of a connection there. And so this is my reasoning why I became interested in this subject. And I did not see anything like that for many, many, many years until this last February. I was working on finishing up the book Winged Aliens, and a part in it about portals. And I've also been working on portals for several other projects. and trying to understand them. Well, I was sitting on the deck meditating, and all of a sudden, and I'm going to show you this picture, it's from the book. This is a drawing that I had Christina McFeeters do because I cannot draw. And what I saw was a flash. I actually happened to be looking up towards the moon, which was to my left. And this flash occurred, but it was a round opening and it was extremely bright. And immediately popped out of it was something that looks like this. Looked like a human shape with wings, and it was all gold color, and it was self-illuminated. So it was illuminated from the inside. It was emitting light. And this figure just flew straight across about 10 feet. And then there was another flash over here on the right side with this opening, and this creature went into that opening, and then it closed. And it was gone. And I just thought, I cannot believe what I just saw, but I know I saw it. And of course, I didn't have a video camera. But this convinced me, I thought it was strange timing because I was working on portals. But this convinced me that there really, really are portals. And I've known this because right at that same location against the wall at the back deck of my house, we've known for 34 years that there is a portal there because we have seen things coming in and out of it. And when the portal is open, it either looks like a swirl pattern or it looks like a window, a 4-pane window. Most of the time, though, it looks like a swirl pattern. And several people have seen it. I have actually had other psychics come to the house to visit, and I said to them, I don't tell them where it is. I said, can you find where the portal is in this house? And every single one of them have gone directly to the spot by feeling it. They didn't see it, but they felt it. Now, my oldest daughter and I have both seen it. And the weirdest thing is that sometimes you will see eyes on the other side looking out and looking at you and looking around. Many times these eyes look like reptile eyes, perhaps like reptilians, I'm not sure. But some other things have come out too, and I call these shadow creatures because they're 3-dimensional and they're all black. There's no color to them at all. Just all black, including their eyes that are black. And there have been things that are known creatures like cats or birds or black panthers, large black panthers. And the time that I saw a black panther was a little bit unnerving. It came from the direction of the portal, walked across the deck and went down the driveway. And then at this certain spot in the driveway, just disappeared. I could not see it any longer. And some other creatures, like combinations of things or unknown creatures, have come out or gone in as well. And I have actually seen an ET walk from my backyard up the steps towards that direction while I was standing at the very front of my house with my brother and my daughter. And so it headed that direction, and I was so freaked out by what I'd seen. I refused to go in the house. My daughter and my brother did go into the house, and they searched around, and they didn't see anyone. So I can only assume that creature just went through that portal. So there are a lot of sightings that have occurred and things that have been connected with fairies. A friend of mine, and a UFO investigator actually for MUFON, lives here in Kansas City, and he told me that at the University of Missouri, there is a place that is called the Fairy Fort, and that it is believed by many that there's a fairy fort there. So that might be worth checking out. There's also something called fairy rings that are associated with fairies according to tradition. fairies dance in a circle at night, and then in the morning, these mushrooms come up. Well, in actuality, what this is a rotted tree that used to be here in this place, or and then spread out, and the roots spread out, and then the mushrooms grow over that area. Yeah, and this is something that's been in tradition for a long time. I received a call from the owner of KCXL Radio one time while I had a show there, and he said, "You've got to get out here because there are fairy rings on our property." And they had a lot of land around the property. It was mowed grass, and this was early spring. So I went out and I found many, I think 7 rings of dark grass compared to the rest of the grass around it. And one of them I measured was 70 feet in diameter. So I had no idea what it was. Had to do some research. I called someone I know who knows about these things and who has done crop circle research, Nancy Talbot. And Nancy told me that they have to be what are called fairy rings, which is mycelium from mushrooms that have grown around old dead trees where they used to be in the ground. And that's why the ground was darker, the grass was darker in those areas at the, in the fairy rings. However, she did say that that's the largest one she's ever heard of, that usually they're about a maximum of 3 to 5 feet. So 70 feet was a huge one. That's what freaked everyone out. Now, I have been doing some investigations lately, and a couple in Oklahoma had their own sightings. And the first sighting that they had was right after a UFO sighting, where they saw some molten stuff coming down from this UFO. And the next day, they saw some fairies, and they've seen them in various sizes from about 1 inch in height to about 10 inches in height. Now, this one is a photo taken by the Morrisons. These, she said, were very, very close to them, and they were about 10 inches long. Now, some people think that these are an insect. I am not sure exactly what they are, because at 10 inches, I don't think they could be a firefly. I mean, not a firefly, a dragonfly or anything like that. So we're still working on it. And this is a black and white version of that photo. And they saw some things that they're calling mimics, where they look part human and part insect, with long legs, dangly legs, and wings and arms, and a face that looks part human and part insect. So I've done a lot of work trying to find out if there are insects that look like what they have drawn here, and I haven't been able to find anything, although there are some weird looking insects out there. Now, some of you have heard of the Cottingley Fairies. And these were some photographs taken by Elsie Wright and Francis Griffiths. There were 2 young cousins who lived in Cottingley in England. In 1917, when these photos were taken, Elsie was 16 and Francis was 9. They came to the attention of Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, who used them to illustrate an article on fairies he had been commissioned to write. It turned out that they had actually fooled Sir Arthur Conan Doyle and a lot of other people. And what they had done was draw on cardboard cutouts, and then using hat pins, stuck them around, and then took photos with their father's camera. And photography wasn't that well known or that much in use at that time. And so people believed what they saw. And then 60 years later, they both confessed that the photos had been faked, except that one of the girls said that there was one photo that was real. She still insisted before her death that there was one photo that was real. So I got to thinking, the belief in fairies in England is quite strong. And in fact, there's a recent book that was written, The Fairy Counties of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, in which they interviewed a lot of people in these areas. And come to find out, 40% of the people they interviewed actually said they saw fairies, and 20% had interactions with them. So this is a long-standing tradition, and they're very serious about it. It's not a joke. But it turns out there could be fairies in the United States as well, and other places. Now this, you may have seen this on a recent documentary on TV. In fact, they've shown this on several places, including Paranormal Fact or Faked and some other shows. The video shows this very strange creature, looks about 10 inches tall with these dangly legs and arms and wings. And at first, they thought it was a dragonfly, but as they got closer to it, it turned around and looked at them and then turned around and flew off. And this child and father are very upset about this. They know this isn't anything normal. So it's rather strange. Okay. Now I would like to bring in Janette La Tulip. Janette has been on the program before. Are you with us, Janette?
I am. Can you hear me?
Okay, great. That is fantastic. I was messaging you earlier today, and you said you'd had your own experience, so I'd like to hear that.
Well, years ago, I had an acquaintance friend that lived over in Long Beach, California. He was a pagan, and he had a friend that was a pagan, and he belonged at one time to the OTO. His friend alleged that he raised demons in his apartment, and this acquaintance of mine, when I went into his apartment with his wife, had very unusual pictures surrounding his living room. And one of those pictures was a deep blue-skinned being. I would say that the eyes were in perspective to the face. This was a very large being, much larger than us. I would say closer to around 7 feet or so, 7, 8 feet. And it just showed actually just the neck and the beginnings of the shoulders and the face. But the eyes were, I would say, almond shaped, and they were slightly upward in the corners, in the back corners. But the hair was a raven black, and it had a sheen to it like a raven's wing, and it was this beautiful blue in the hair. The highlight in the hair was the blue, as well as the deep skin that was blue. But and then I asked what that was, and he said it was a fae. And I thought, well, that's fine. I'm not going to pass any judgment. I'll just look around and I'll keep talking. And I was going through a rather messy divorce at the time, to the point it was so messy that my ex put a contract out on me. So
that's messy.
Messy. So I wanted justice served. And so what he did is he had a consecrated black mirror, and I still have the text how to do this. It's a book that's out of circulation now, but this mirror was like I said, it was all done up, it was consecrated, and he put it before me, and he said, I just want you to look into the mirror. And he says, think about what you would like to have done. And he said, a fae will come to you that is willing to do what you're asking. And I thought, well, this is really overboard, but I'll go along with the program. And so I did it, and I just left my mind blank, and it appeared in the mirror, and it was this deep blue being with the upswept eyes and the raven hair, gloss blue, and I was very surprised. But I tried to remain centered. And so after it was all done, everything happened the way I requested.
Oh my goodness.
Right. So that's the only time that I saw it was in a black mirror, and he had seen them too. And he painted these pictures and was selling them in a metaphysical store in the area.
Were there any consequences for you regarding that? Did you ever
No.
see that again or have anything happen?
No, I haven't seen the Fae again. I didn't have any consequences because I believe it was justified. I just read an interesting report from someone recently regarding these beings that kind of cross over. There was a time when I did have a consequence because it was unjustified. I found out that through what I do, if I don't have consequences, if I put out the question, if this person is guilty of this, then let it happen. If they're not guilty, it will never happen. So
Okay.
there seems to be some sort of a balance in that. And then I don't suffer any consequences if I do it that way. But it was
Yeah.
the show that I had listened to. This man was dealing with these different things, and God, I'm so sorry. I lost. He about UFO and ET contact, and these abductees are alleging that they're seeing all of this myriad of different beings and different things. And he said, I haven't had any contact. He said, I'm not an abductee, and I haven't seen what they've seen. However, I am an occultist. He said, and I've seen all of these things that they're reporting as an abductee. So
Wow.
I thought I'd throw that up. Yeah.
Well,
that's powerful.
I think that has to do with, I believe that they're interdimensional beings. And what we're seeing is a glimpse of another dimension when this happens. And that sometimes they do come in our world. Like I said earlier, the portal on my porch, the fairy comes in the portal and goes out through another portal. Well, that was in my dimension at that time. But there could be times where we cross over into another dimension, and maybe knowingly or unknowingly that happens. And that's there's so much about this we don't understand, but it's fascinating to discuss and to hypothesize. And maybe as we keep digging, we might get more answers. It's like, people are getting more pictures of ETs lately, and I've seen some amazing ones just in the last few days of these, unbelievable pictures of ETs. And, some more people are getting fairy pictures as well. And this is encouraging me to put a camera up at my house at the portal 24/7 to try to capture something.
Can I say one thing?
Sure.
Oh, yeah, we learned about that is that homogeneous couples tend to think alike and cross each other's T's and dot each other's I's. And sometimes, the more homogeneous you are, the easier it is to do that. And I think part of what's going on is okay, this is all over right now. It's just spreading like wildfire, this ET thing and interdimensional thing. And I think people are beginning to think about it, and they're starting to align in their thinking, their brainwave patterns. That's what homogeneous couples do. Their brainwave patterns align, and then they think alike. And I think our brain, and then they can convey thoughts to one another. And it's so easy because one person will be in the room, they'll be thinking, well, gee, you know, tuna fish sandwich sounds really good right now. And the other one was saying, I just had a taste for that in my mouth. And I think with other people and whatnot that are hearing all of this, I think we're being tuned, or we're tuning one another. And as a result of being tuned, we're becoming more receptive, and we're on that frequency length, and we can actually start seeing how complicated our world really is.
Oh, it sure is. Absolutely. Thank you so much for coming on the program, Janette. I appreciate your comments and your story. And we'll have you on again soon, okay? Thank you. All right. So we're going to have another guest come on here in a few minutes. I'm going to show you some of his really, really amazing pictures. In the meantime, I want to bring up another more recent fairy capture in England. Pretty famous. This is called the Rochdale Fairies. And this was captured by a British professor. His name is John Hyatt. He lectures on art research at Manchester Metropolitan University. He took the photos around Lancashire, the UK, and the collection is entitled Rochdale Fairies. It's on display at the Whitaker Museum in Rochdale. He said that he spotted these tiny creatures after taking pictures at dusk. So he was taking pictures, and then when he enlarged them, he saw these figures. He said they're not doctored, apart from increasing the size of a detailed section of a larger photograph in order to stop them from being just large pixels. And so here are these tiny creatures, and it's gotten a huge buzz about it. There's an entomologist named Erica McLaughlin, and she writes in the British Natural History Museum's Nature Plus blog that the creatures that Hyatt photographed are most likely a small species of fly known as the midge. So, Hyatt says people can decide for themselves what they are. The message to people is to approach them with an open mind. I think it's one of those situations where you need to believe to see. A lot of people who have not seen them say they have brought a little bit of magic into their lives, and there's not enough of that around. All right, and then this one, let me get this other picture here, is another section of what he got. Kind of difficult to see, but if you have seen a fairy, I would like to hear about it, and you can email me at margiek06@yahoo.com, or find me on Facebook. I'm on Facebook, and also Onyx Media on Facebook group. And I have created this map, a Google map, of all of the winged creature sightings that I discuss in the book, which include Mothman and Batman and any type of a large or small winged creature, and fairies. So these are on that map. It's an interactive map, and the link to that is at unxmedia.com and margiek.com. If you have seen anything and you send it to me, I will put it on that map along with your description. Now, there's one other case that I'd like to discuss. This is someone I spoke to just about 3 months ago. This is an older gentleman in his 80s living in a small town in California. And he's a rock collector. He's been a rock hound his entire life. He finds interesting rocks and he cleans them off, and then he sets them up around his property. And he said he had been cleaning some rocks, and he thought that there was some type of a moss or lichens or something like that on these rocks, and he was cleaning them off when this very, very tiny, what he thought was a fly, flew at him and bit him in the face, and it hurt. And then it backed off and stayed near him so he could get a good look at it. He said that was not a fly. It was about 1 inch tall, and it looked like a little human with the torso, legs, and arms and face. Everything was human about it, except that it had wings. And it moved very quickly, except when it stopped to look at him. And he was in shock, and it kept buzzing around him. And he was like, what in the world is going on? And so he looked at this rock that he had in his hand, and he realized that what was there was actually not lichen or any kind of dirt or anything. It was a skeleton of a tiny fairy. So it seems that whatever this other creature was mad about what he was doing. So he got to thinking about this, and he went and picked up some of his other rocks and is going through them, and he notices that there are more tiny fairy skeletons on these other rocks. And they would found like a little indentation in the rock, and that's where they would put, evidently, that's how they buried their dead. So take it for what it's worth. I'm not sure if this story is true, but this gentleman seemed very serious about it, and he had never told a soul about it. He just wanted to tell someone before he passed on. So he said he has this collection, and he protects them, and now he no longer gets attacked by these tiny fairies. Well, this is the first time that I had ever heard of a tiny fairy that small. So I did some more research and talked to some other people. And sure enough, this couple that I told you about earlier in Oklahoma, the Morrisons, who took pictures of these creatures, what they call the mimics, the 10-inch ones, also have seen little tiny 1-inch fairies. Now, they didn't know about this story and this conversation I had with this other gentleman, but they saw these fairies in this area here that I'm going to show you right now.
You can see them, if you got to be quick.
Lloyd, I was looking for that video or that picture I took last night.
Which one?
The one up against the sewer line there.
Oh, yeah.
Or that not sewer line.
Yeah, we got a creature that has a frog.
You see they kind of go like this? Yeah. Yeah. Did you just see it? Yeah. Yeah, they're all over there.
Good.
She's seeing it. She's seeing them.
Do they kind of make a jerky?
Yes, that's them.
I saw them, yeah.
And they're in all different sizes. And for some reason, they're letting you guys see them. I normally don't. And there's one that looks like a bird until you get to looking at it real good.
Yeah, that's the one I thought when I saw it. I
Now these are, that's just from the willow tree there. It's amazing.
Yeah.
I wish that big one would come back.
Because like
It
I said,
almost
I've
acts
been
like
watching
it has
the
something
birds
to
and trying to identify them.
Uh-huh.
So that when
Okay. So that was a video that I took on this property in Midwest City, Oklahoma. There's a large park behind their land, and there was a compost pile. I don't know if you noticed that in the lower left-hand corner of that video. We actually saw some very fast-moving winged creatures. I don't know what they were yet because I haven't had time to take this video apart and enlarge it. But they were fast-moving. Some of them were larger than others. Most of them were very small. And the couple, they were telling me at the time that they could identify that these were the fairies and that's where they hung out. Well, I surmised the reason why something might be there is because of that compost pile, because there was actually some food there, a food source. And there was also in the tree to the right, I was drawn to that tree, and I feel like that's where something like that has been hanging out, and this is just psychically picking up for a long time before this couple moved there. Now, this site, I believe, is a portal as well, because they have seen multiple UFOs there. They've seen a ghost, a spirit of a woman walking in the park on the other side, and then they found out that a lady died at that spot some years ago, and she is seen walking up and down. They have seen these other creatures, the mimics, things like that out there. And they've experienced a strange feeling, they said, of suddenly hearing no sounds. There's no birds chirping, there's no bugs out at the night, and these things just stop. So it's either that they're in a sort of a vacuum state in a portal is one theory that is, or they're time jumping. So a lot of times people who have missing time experiences have those same things happen. Like to hear your story, so let me know. And now I'm going to look up in the comments. And James Bear says, do you know who Carrick is? And no, I do not, so I'm going to have to look that up. Irish fairies, yes, there are a lot of Irish fairies, especially a lot of tales around County Antrim, where my ancestors are from, on my father's side. County Antrim has, a long history of gnomes and elves and leprechauns and fairies. And before my next guest comes in here in just a minute, I'm going to tell you a leprechaun story because it's related. I'd never believed in leprechauns to start off with. I always thought that they were a fairy story. Until one day, a few years ago, I was doing a paranormal investigation at my brother's house in Independence, Missouri, where they had been seeing some strange things. He and his wife had both seen a number of spirits in their house. Men wearing Civil War uniforms, and a woman looking out a window, an older lady looking out a window, and a man in a marshal's uniform walking up and down their steps. So they wanted me to come in to find out why this was happening. So I brought all my equipment and checked it out. And I determined that there was a graveyard right in the back of their house on another property, and these spirits were just passing through. They didn't actually have anything to do with their house. However, while I was sitting at the kitchen table talking to my brother, I saw a little, about 16-inch tall leprechaun in the full green leprechaun outfit with the shoes and the hat and the whole 9 yards walk behind him and walk towards the living room. And I just stopped and I said, do you know you have a leprechaun in the house? And at that time, that little creature turned around and looked at me in the face. He says, you can see me? Well, of course, this is fifth dimension stuff. I am psychic. I use my psychic center. My third eye was open because I was working on this case, and I just happened to catch this leprechaun. My brother said, no, he had no idea. And he said, what is his name? So I asked his name, and he said his name was Skykes, Skykes. I said, where are you from? And he said, County Antrim, Ireland. Where your ancestors are from? He said, I came over with them in the 1700s when they came over on the boat. And he said that he has been with the family for multiple generations, going way back, but that recent generations were not aware of him. And he was sad about that. But he was hanging around until somebody could actually see him and interact with him. So I was just dumbfounded by what I was looking at. I know I had not been drinking or smoking anything. So I thought that was the end of it. And I said, well, Frank, you might just put out some milk and cookies, because they had been having some problems with things disappearing, especially like his wife's very expensive jewelry would disappear and then it would reappear in another place, very strange place. So it turns out that it was the leprechaun doing that. Now, oddly enough, that leprechaun followed me to my office, and he has been in my office ever since. And that's where I am right now. And once in a while, he plays jokes on people. He usually, he's mostly, you don't see him, but, once or twice a year, he shows up. So he's still hanging on to the family through the generations. And now I'm going to bring in another guest. His name is Joey George. Welcome to the program, Joey. And I cannot hear you. So, do you have your mic on? And I just heard something. Hopefully you've got a... Okay, let's try now. Oh, we just lost him. Okay. Maybe he'll try to reconnect here, because I would really like for him to show you some of these pictures that he got. Okay, we've got him back in now.
Can you hear me?
There we go. Okay. We've got a storm going on here, so it may not be your fault. It's probably our fault. Welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Thanks for taking time. I know we just talked today about this. We've been in communication about a few other things, but when I saw your photo that you sent me, wow, I just had to discuss that. So why don't you tell the story behind these pictures that you got?
Okay. It was 2018 4th of July weekend, right around this time. My grandfather had purchased a lake house out on Fort Gibson Lake out in the town of Wagner. And me and my ex-girlfriend were just kind of poking around the marina one night. And she started yelling at me. She's like, "You got to come here and look at this. Come here, come here." So I walked over there, and there's this thing flying around this light. And I wasn't really into the whole fairy theory or idea of there being fairies really at the time. It was kind of funny. Just the very day before, I'd been watching some YouTube videos, and I just kind of let it run through to, randomly to whatever it went to next. And it ended up on these fairy videos. And so as soon as I saw it, I was like, it's a fairy. And I started filming it, and that's what you have here. So
how tall do you think this was?
I got face to face with it. Eventually it landed up there at the top of that pole. It was about 4 inches.
Okay. So is there any chance that could be an insect?
Not from my point of view, no. I mean, everyone wants to call it a bat or whatever, giant moth, which we have a lot of here. But I mean, I think the still frames kind of speak for themselves.
Yeah, I mean, it really looks like it's got legs with, knees and feet. And of course, there are some insects that might look similar, but this one looks a little too big, and then you have a video of this.
Yeah, these are still shots from the video.
Yeah, so if people want to see your video, how can they see it?
Go to Joey George, the UFO Magnet, on YouTube or Facebook.
Okay. And
I'm putting together my YouTube thing. I have a short attention span, so I only have like 13 videos on there so far, but there's some pretty good ones.
Okay. And where was this taken?
The fairy video?
Yeah.
That was in Wagner, Oklahoma.
Okay. And what time of night was it, did you say?
Oh, it was probably 11 or 12.
So pretty late. Were there any other things like that flying around, or was it just the one?
There was a couple little tiny bugs, I guess, but that was pretty much it.
And did they look green like they do in these pictures?
That was a more or less a filter that I had on my filmed it with my phone. So
Oh, I see. I
it
see.
didn't
Okay.
see that way. It wasn't actually that color of green. It was green, but not quite that bright.
Okay. Okay. Wow. So have you seen anything else strange around that area?
Name it.
Okay.
It's kind of funny. We realized after we started to walk away, we decided to leave this thing alone, and head back up to the house. And we noticed a plaque right there in the general area that was dedicated to one of the original Cherokee Indian chiefs, and had a quote from him. I can't remember the quote exactly, but it made it more significant. Why that thing might be flying around that area.
Yeah, absolutely. There could be a connection. Maybe, I mean, was that Native American land
Oh yeah,
you were on?
it's
Okay.
Oklahoma. It's all Native American land here.
Yeah,
But
there's
that's
there's
more
a
or less
lot.
Cherokee land right there. Yeah.
I see. Right. Now, you've mentioned that you've had some other sightings. Can you tell us a little bit about what else you've seen?
Like I said, I've been seeing strange things since I was a child. Orbs, triangular craft, ghosts, orbs inside my house that I can get to land in my hand sometimes on command. Just a lot of
Really?
I had a Canada goose swim up to me one day behind my apartments and say hello to me in English in a computerized sounding voice, which was pretty strange.
Oh, yeah, I would say that's on the high strangeness scale. Yes. Wow. I can't say as I've ever heard anyone say that. Now, some people who are UFO experiencers or just paranormal experiencers in general do see these orbs inside their houses.
Right.
So, how often does that happen?
Almost every time I turn on my camera, if I'm looking for them, then they usually show up.
Okay, so do you think there's some kind of telepathic communication going on here if
I
you're
definitely
thinking about it?
Right. I think they all have some kind of telepathic communication and kind of tell me when to look.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Not sure. We just lost your picture and also sound. So thank you, Joey. We appreciate it. Thanks for coming on. And we lost connection on that. So let me take care of that. So we had a couple of people come on this evening to discuss what they've seen. And now everybody knows that I have seen fairies. I don't think they could have been anything else. I really don't. I had something very strange happen actually this afternoon while I was putting this broadcast together and thinking about fairies. I opened my front door to my office, and this about 2-inch tall, very, very bright yellow flying thing came in, and I turned around and I looked for it everywhere, and it was not in here. It flew in here. It was not in here. I don't know what it was. I didn't get a good enough look at it, but I thought it was kind of odd that happened, especially on the day that I'm working on a fairy report. So go figure on that. But, there have been lots and lots of tales of fairy creatures, and so many so in the UK, England, Ireland, Scotland, that I would say most people there absolutely believe that they're real. And they actually do have some areas that they call fairy forts or little hills that if they know there are fairies there, they don't disturb them. Because if they do, then bad things start happening to them. And I've heard a number of reports of people saying that you've got to stay away from this area, and they'll mark them off. So it's super real to them. There are some strange things happening here, though. They're probably all over the U.S. And this is a subject that I have great interest in. Want to get to the bottom of it. Like to hear your stories. Send me a message at my email, margiek06@yahoo.com, or you can contact me through Facebook at Margie K on Facebook. And we'll get that on the map, and I will republish the map on my Facebook site very soon so that you can see where all of these winged creatures are going on. And be sure to, you might want to get a copy of my book, Winged Aliens. And boy, that is a terrible picture off of Amazon. But this is what it's about. I discuss historic and current winged creature sightings that remain unexplained by conventional science. Sightings of pterodactyls, thunderbirds, mothman, giant birds, and even fairies that appear and disappear without a trace have perplexed men for centuries. Yet no one has come up with a rational explanation as to why credible people have seen these creatures until now. Why is it that UFOs are sometimes seen in the vicinity of these creatures? In this book, I discuss the probability that these winged beings could actually be aliens or interdimensional beings moving in and out of our three-dimensional world. Newly obtained photos and video from witnesses support this theory, and I do have over 120 accounts from witnesses in the book, and I've collected more since then, so I would say that there is going to be a second update on that book, a second edition, coming out probably in the next year. Thank you for listening tonight. I hope you liked the subject, and I like to talk about anything that's weird or unexplained. So if you've had a sighting, be sure to contact me, and we'll discuss it on the program. I'm Margie K. See you next time.
You've been listening to the UNX News Podcast with Margie K. Any rebroadcast or duplication of this program or its content without express written permission from Margie K. is strictly prohibited. The UNX News Podcast, in direct cooperation with the internet website margiek.com.